violated their orders for restricted movement. And so she had requested the Attorney General to look into the quarantine laws that are on Guam and see where it can be enforced. And so the AG's office started conducting their investigations.
All right, and so let's bring on Attorney General Leevin Camacho to talk a little bit more about this. Good morning, AG.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Sabrina.
Good morning.
We'll just go ahead and give you the floor. Just give the status, if you could.
Well, Chris, I think when we got Speaker's letter, we've been monitoring the situation, and I think we all agree that one of the basic premises of our law is that everyone needs to be treated fairly and equally. So we've been monitoring the situation, and it seemed as though when the Department of Defense said that they would kind of handle things on their own, that some people thought, okay, we'll just let them go that route. And that's just not acceptable for our office, especially when we have laws that make it a misdemeanor to violate quarantine orders. So we started our investigation. I know Speaker was concerned because we've been complying with these quarantine orders for months now, and it is a misdemeanor under our law to violate quarantine orders. So the first thing we did is we pulled up the public health guidance on travelers inbound to Guam, and everyone is required to fill out a form. Residents are able to quarantine at home now. That was a recent change. But if you're not a resident, they have essential worker exceptions for medical workers, airline passenger or airline employees, and then you get down to the active duty military, and that was the only provision that limited the quarantine orders and signing it to if you arrive to Guam via commercial air or sea. So that brings up, we have basically a different treatment if you arrive to Guam at the Guam International Airport versus if you arrive to Guam at Anderson. So that's we're still at the fact-finding stage of our investigation, but that's what we've been able to learn. We've been in contact with public health, but our position is that yes, the military has their own rules and regulations, but no other employer would we ever say if they brought in 120 people and 10 or 12 of them were out violating the quarantine orders, it's okay, you guys can handle it, we're good, right? So just the impression that it does seem as though it's not fair.
So your investigators, your office, you guys have had direct contact with the military?
We've been working with public health, and I think you guys ran a story basically saying that they're not even getting direct access to the service members. So, I think our community has some very valid questions. What orders did they sign? I know they said that they violated these restrictions on movement orders, but were they required to sign our forms? Were they not required to sign our forms? If they didn't sign our forms, what forms did they sign? What measures were taken to make sure that they were complying with any orders if they were staying off base? How early did they know that there were these problems? So, there's just a lot of questions that we're hoping to get answers to, and there's a chance we won't, but we're going to try. We're going to try our best to figure out what happened in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is good, like a good litmus test to find out exactly how much authority your office has to ask the military these questions?
Well, they say they're going to be cooperative, but again, I just think it comes down to okay, don't worry, we're going to handle it on our own, and we do have our own laws. So no other crime if you could commit, that you would be able to just move someone onto base and say we're going to avoid local prosecution. There would be some serious problems with that. So we don't know if any crimes were committed here. A lot of it's going to turn on what evidence we're able to get. As I mentioned, it's a violation of public health orders, but we don't even know at this point whether or not they were required to sign public health orders.
Right.
Because they may have come in through Anderson.
That's correct.
Do you know where they came from at all?
We're trying to get a solid answer before I can give you. I can answer that, but it's every day the information is changing. I'll tell you, Sabrina.
Do you know how many?
We know that the general number of those who came in was around 130.
Right. Yeah.
And I know there were 35 or 35 positives for this group in particular, but what we don't know is how many of them violated the restrictive, the quote unquote orders, right? Was it, one or two people? Okay, that may just be real poor decision making on the part of those folks. But if we're talking 10 or 20, then there's a serious breakdown in what exactly are we doing to make sure they're complying with these orders. And the only way that we're going to be assured moving forward that this isn't going to happen again is we need to be very transparent about the measures we're taking now in response to this. So if there was a gap for those arriving through Naval Base Guam directly or flying in through Anderson. We need to know what those measures are going to be.
I mean, 30 different locations. It's hard to imagine just one or two people going. I mean, they racked up some miles, unless these were like the Gophers. You know?
Well, Chris, and it goes back to those are very basic questions. And
Right.
I don't think that the compromise of national security or HIPAA. Just tell us how many are we talking about that violated these orders? Because, and I'll tell you on the flip side of this, we've been working with public health, and it's not just a service member problem. We have locals who are supposed to come home and quarantine at home that are violating.
Right. Yeah.
And we've been having discussions about what we're going to do, and public health has been focusing on education, telling them you need to comply. Look at our numbers today, that there's probably some of it's going to be connected to travel.
Right.
But how can we in good faith arrest someone locally when we know that there are folks who are infected and violated quarantine orders that we're supposed to be following, and we didn't do anything in that case? So we're going to exhaust all efforts on our end to make sure that we figure out what happened. If we can pursue action, we're going to take it. And if not, then we're going to make sure that if it happens in the future, we can.
Right. Have you had any conversation with the Air Force JAG?
Again, because we've been working with public health primarily, is just trying to figure out on our side what the protocol is and what the procedures are. And we just started on Monday.
Okay.
So we know that they're in talks with the Air Force, and we're trying to figure out what we can get from our local government first, and then we can make those calls to the Air Force.
I'm reading your letter, and it says DPHSS is also supposed to be notified by DOD when arriving service members are staying off base, right? And I want to see if you're aware, did the Theodore Roosevelt sailors also, obviously they were notified, but did they have to sign these papers that you were referring to earlier?
I don't know what they were required to sign.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that our office's position has been, if the only way that we can enforce these types of our laws is if they sign, or it makes it much cleaner for us to enforce our orders if these documents are signed. So we can go back and we can see what the process was when they did that. But that's always been our position from the very beginning, that these documents should be signed by all travelers.
Right, when they arrive to Guam.
Correct.
Does that apply if you're arriving by sea?
It applies to everyone except for if you're not coming in, if you're flying commercial or arriving
so
by
it's
boat commercial. So
I see.
that's a wrinkle here that I think I'm pretty confident is going to be resolved moving forward. Yeah.
That's
So to answer your question directly, Sabrina, it doesn't appear as though if you arrived directly on Naval Base Guam through a boat, you were required to sign any public health forms.
you're not required. It's not clear whether you're.
It doesn't look like that based on the guidance.
Oh, okay. It just seems like, when the Theodore Roosevelt sailors came in, there was this, it's like they had to get approval to come off base, right? And then all these restrictions, or not even restrictions, all these restrictions were in place where they could go, where they could not go. And we were part of the military monitored that. But it just seems like with the Air Force, they came in, they quarantined at the reef, and I don't know, where else. And there was no monitoring of these guys.
There was no communication, it sounds like, right? Or monitoring.
Yeah.
And I will say public health has just been, they are having, some of our investigators are assisting in the quarantine checks. And they are monitoring a lot of people right now at home. And that's one of the things that when we moved from quarantining at facilities, government facilities, to allowing for quarantine at home, it just puts a big stress on public health to go out and to make sure that folks are following what they're agreeing to. So, I could see, depending on the numbers, but you're right, and this is what happens when there's a breakdown potentially.
Yeah.
We lose track.
And we have service members out gallivanting.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's next?
So we're still continuing our investigation. We're going to find out. Those are the questions that we're looking at, figuring out, how many people did violate these orders, what the orders were, what type of measures were put in place to ensure compliance. And we'll be sharing that with Speaker. She's been very supportive of us in doing this because she's concerned, and she's rightfully pointed out again that any other employer would have been, just completely taken to task if this had happened under their watch.
Right.
At what
we
point?
just want to make sure we can treat everyone fairly.
At what point does it go from asking the military for certain information to demanding the military
Yeah, and
provide?
asserting that authority.
We'll see when we get there, Sabrina. Chris,
We want to see the We Are Guam leaving out here. Like, hey, I want to see you jump the fence and
Well, hopefully hopefully, we all joking aside, Chris, and you mentioned that, and this whole, I don't know, it's been over 10 years or so. It feels like it's been an eternity, but this whole one Guam, good neighbors, right? And then this thing happens, and it's just, you just can't put your blind trust that people are going to comply, and just, okay, you're the military, don't worry, you're going to do good. And I think that's just part of what, as a community, we're struggling with. It does seem like they're getting a pass here. That okay, don't worry, they're going to handle it on their side, right? It's like once you set foot off the base, you put our people at risk. Those 30 establishments, the person who tested positive at the Guam Reef Hotel, that's not just the military and their mission, and that's their main concern is their mission. But our office represents the people of Guam, and we can't in good faith go out and arrest our locals and bring down the wrath of God on local businesses and then give certain people a pass because for whatever reason. So
I wanted to, before we let you go, the Department of the Interior, the AG's office, they received part of this technical assistance grant for financial forensics training.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I can tell you that we got the award, and we're looking at the grant documents. I'm proud of our grants team, and I know that we have, just from our financial perspective, just getting our internal compliance measures lined up, but it's not particularly sexy stuff right now. So,
financial forensics.
Financial forensics.
Controls, but it's not
Okay.
I had one. AG is there was a CARES Act funds available for daycares with the any PPEs and all that stuff, and so Public Health had said they sent it over to you guys for review, and then Carlina had said you did some review and assistance. So specifically on the CARES Act funds that Public Health is going to be disbursing for the daycare and the child care centers, what was the involvement with your office, and have you completed that so we can tell the daycares who've been kind of waiting where we're at right now?
Chris, so that during this whole public health emergency, we've kind of recognized and we've done things a little bit differently and been more proactive in offering our assistance to our agency clients. And this is an example where I can tell you right now, there's no document on my desk just waiting for my signature before it gets out and these child care centers are going to be given their grants. Our office at this point is basically offering grant assistance and technical assistance and guidance to public health to make sure they're going to comply with all the requirements that they need to put in place and procedures they need to put in place to implement their program. So public health rightfully wants to make sure they're going to spend that money in accordance with their grant conditions and the CARES Act law, but we're not at a stage where there's a document that's just waiting for my review. Okay.
And so just in English, if you
we're going back and forth, and we're helping them to develop their program, and once they get that finalized, then it'll come to our office for final review, and that'll be, I know that this is a big deal. We're, as a family, I have a young son that we're waiting for him to go back to childcare, and it's just, I think that's another one of those things where as parents, you're coming into work. We're going to be opening up more potentially. I just saw that we might be slowing it down, but it's very difficult to expect anyone to go back to work 100% and then not have anywhere to put your kids.
Right.
So we recognize how important it is for everyone, whether you're an essential worker, whether you've been working throughout this time, to get that money out. But we're not the holdup, I can tell you, Chris, I guess, in layperson's terms.
Okay. Last question. The Tier 2 clinics, we had spoke with Dr. Hoa and a few of these clinics, and at least on Dr. Hoa's side, he had said that there was some stuff at your office for review relative to payments to these Tier 2 clinics. Can you just, we haven't heard anything, so whatever you can offer is good.
I know there were some discussions, Chris, but I think you're seeing a trend here that normally if there's a way to get you off the phone, it's to stay with the AG's office. So, because as much they just hope that they can say that I don't call into your show, but I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks. That's it. You good, Reed?
Yeah, I can't remember anything right now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, and I think you're in the same place a lot of people are at. It's just we just don't. How can we get to a place where we don't have very basic questions answered?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
And I wish I could tell you more. And we're just trying to piece through it right now too.
Right.
And once we can give those answers, we will. But I share your kind of like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And I can assure you that we are doing everything that we can. And yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, AG.
Yeah, wash your hands.
All right.
Be
Thank you,
safe.
you too.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe we'll get him on next week to kind of catch up on what's going on with that. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. 857. It kind of sounds like, in terms of this investigation into these airmen who willfully violated their superiors' orders and jeopardized the public health of the people of Guam, it kind of sounds like he's still in the discovery phase, like going through what public health orders are. I think that's pretty interesting stuff, though. He's right. When all inbound travelers into Guam are required to adhere to all these different public health measures, like you said, filling out the form. But this really